That Great Business Show, Ireland's best business podcast.
ThatGreatBusinessShow.com is brought to you by De Facto Shaving Oil, the best anyone can get. Made in Ireland, sold worldwide.
Welcome to episode 90 of That Great Business Show, posting on the 3rd of June 2022. I had a phone call a couple of weeks ago from Tom Murphy, founder of our podcast sponsor, De Facto Shaving Oil. Tom had just heard a man called Martin Curley speak at an event, and he said that I had to have Martin on the podcast. Now, Martin Curley may not be a household name yet, but it could be in the future. Listen to this. I'm only going to give you about a quarter of his titles. He is co-founder and professor at the Innovation Value Institute at Maynooth University. He is Director of Digital Transformation and Open Innovation at the HSE. He was Senior VP and Group Head for Global Digital Practice at MasterCard. He was VP at Intel Corporation and Director GM of Intel Labs Europe, a network of more than 50 research labs that he helped grow across the European region. He also worked in research and management positions at GE in Ireland and Philips in the Netherlands. And the coolest thing I learned about Martin so far, he's had a law called after him, Curley's Law. Dr. Martin Curley, welcome to That Great Business Show.
Great. Thank you so much, Conal. Looking forward to the conversation.
Well, first things first, what is Curley's Law?
Gosh, I feel a little bit uncomfortable talking about that because I've had the privilege of working at Intel with Moore's Law, with Gordon Moore and Moore's Law. And I remember as a newly minted executive, my very first extended executive meeting in Santa Clara many years ago, who comes over and sits and have lunch with me with Gordon Moore. And, he's multi-billionaire, huge philanthropist. And we were both eating sandwiches out of a brown paper bag. How cool is that? And Moore's Law has driven sort of dramatic, the changes that we're witnessing on a day-to-day basis are driven by Moore's Law. And essentially, that is that every 18 months or so, transistor density is doubling, and that's being delivered at less or equal cost. And that then turns into computing being a resource that is transforming very, very fast. So anyway, the Curley's Law, as suggested,
I was going to come back to you about it.
So it's the idea, and it's something we've been observing, is that so digital is an exponential technology. Healthcare is an information-intensive business. So, I can't think of any other business other than semiconductor manufacturing that's as information-intensive as healthcare. And then when you put together an exponential innovation methodology, and we call it Open Innovation 2.0,
can you just hold that and explain that to me, to a simple man like me? What does that actually mean?
So let's see, what does it mean in reality? Many health systems across the world are really challenged, and incremental innovation isn't enough. Our systems aren't sustainable. But when we apply digital technology to healthcare, we actually get exponential outcomes and, almost quantum leaps. So I'm wearing a technology on my arm. It's a credit card type device. It's from a Scottish company called Wear, and it's delivering real-time vital signs to my phone. It's also being viewed in Letterkenny. And this capability, it's the consumerization of healthcare. This actually gives a better capability than you would actually have in an acute hospital bed. So this is maybe 100 times cheaper. It's, 10 times more convenient. It's empowering the customer. So Curley's Law, if there is a law, is about actually exponential outcomes, and we're on the cusp of a Berlin Wall moment. Every time I look at a digital solution deployed in a healthcare environment, we're seeing supernormal returns. So, for example, we put a vital signs automation solution into Cavan Hospital. It actually detects patients that are deteriorating quicker. It makes the nurse's role much easier. They're 2 or 3 times more productive. It takes a cognitive load off the nurses. It reduces average length of stay. It actually provides increased capacity, acute capacity at 1/100 of the cost. And the best thing of all, well, not the best thing of all, but the return, the internal rate of return is 1,100%. Many years ago, I wrote a book on business cases, and I've looked at hundreds and hundreds of business cases. I never saw anything like 1,100%. But now, repeatedly, we're working with a company called X-Wave, and they have a diagnostic solution to help GPs pick the best tests first. The return is 2,700%.
They've been on the programme. They've been on the podcast.
Great company, Mitchell and John C. And the beauty of this is we actually could eliminate the diagnostic waiting list by just deploying this tool across the country. So, right now, I don't remember the exact numbers, but what we see at a minimum, 6% of diagnostic tests are inappropriately prescribed. And guess what the size of our waiting list? It's 6% of the overall, workload. So if we deploy this technology, and it's about getting the best test first, not only do the patients get the best test, but we could eliminate the waiting list in less than a year. And waiting lists have grown 18%, 20% since COVID, and that's not sustainable. And very often people think about waiting lists as statistics, but there's a community of leaders in Ireland that have come together to form the Irish Digital Health Leadership Steering Group, and we know that waiting lists translate into deaths, they translate into suffering, they translate into cost. So we think there's an approach in the community, and we've developed a strategy called Stay Left, Shift Left, 10X. I'll explain what that means, but by using these 10X technologies...
Now, by 10X, that is 10 times,
that
correct?
Means, so 10 times the transformation. Yeah. So, for example, I've brought a technology into the studio with me here. It's a pill camera from Medtronic, and we've just gone live with this in Tallaght Hospital with Professor Deirdre McNamara. And this allows, in the past, there was, a one-to-one correspondence. One consultant could only do one colonoscopy. But we've just enabled this as a cloud-based service. So Professor McNamara, she can now see 10 patients at the same time. So across the region, at a health centre or even a GP, we're not yet with the GPs, but instead of having a colonoscopy, you go to your health centre, you swallow a pill camera, the data it passes through your bowels, and the data is sent via the cloud. And Professor McNamara, in her living room, actually could look at this and make a diagnosis. So that's an example where we could do 10 or 20 times the volume. And
for those listening, it looks like something that Austin Powers, did you ever see that one that he had taken, if you remember that?
Exactly.
And I also bags not pick it up. Thank you. That is mad. 10 times, 20 times. So may I say it, 10x or 20x?
Exactly, yeah. So I think hopefully the vocabulary in Ireland will be using 10x, 20x. Actually, it's a very familiar term in the tech industry, but it really hasn't made into the medicine vocabulary yet. But I hope it'll actually come into mainstream vocabulary, because the challenges are so great. The only way we will turn our system around, and we have a lot of great things in Ireland. We're the 12th most prosperous country in the world. We were recently voted the 13th happiest. But our healthcare system actually is a third world healthcare system. So we have first world clinicians, but Iran, Algeria, Albania, Serbia, Romania, Kuwait, they're all ranked above us. So we're ranked number 80. And it's not, I had a group from Purdue University in this morning. We had a great dialogue, and we're going to actually do some great collaboration together. They saw some of the ideas that we're using in Ireland could really fit into the US healthcare system. But the methodology we talk about is called Open Innovation 2.0. It's actually quite a sophisticated methodology. With the top level, it's really simple. It's having trusted relationships, intensive networking, focused on a shared vision, which is Stay Left, Shift Left, and I'll explain that in a minute. And then we create shared value. So there's a whole new sort of, the economy is being reshaped by technology. And Friedman 50 years ago talked about the purpose of the firm is to maximize shareholder value. And that's increasingly become defunct. And what we now talk about in Open Innovate, we talk about well-being, welfare, and wealth. And the whole idea that health isn't a cost, it's actually an investment. And if you invest in people's health, if you invest in the health system, actually it'll generate the outcomes you want in terms of welfare and well-being, but it'll also generate wealth.
And all of these innovations you are talking about, I'm looking at them, so they're here. When will they be generally available?
Well, we actually have some of the technologies in the field. So if I give one practical example, then I'll answer the question. We've been working with Centric Health and Roche for over a year, and we have 100 heart failure patients being monitored remotely. Now, heart failure is important because 15.5% of all deaths come from heart failure. And actually, if you get a heart failure diagnosis in Ireland, your mortality rate is about 20%. So if you get diagnosed this year, 1 in 5 chance you'll be dead. But we've had some
happy note.
Yeah, but the really good news is we can manage that, and we can make patients feel much safer. So we've been monitoring 100 patients for a year, and what we've seen, we've been able to reduce the amount of hospitalizations by a factor of 10x. And the way we detect that, for example, is rapid weight gain. And if we see that happen, then we can titrate a new prescription or provide a new prescription, a diuretic, and it ameliorates the situation. I think in the course of a year, we've only had one case where a patient had to go to hospital. So the quality of life for the patient is dramatically improved. Normally, a heart failure patient gets about 8 checkups a year. Now they're getting at least 100. In fact, it's continuous. If we see a problem, Centric Health are able to, react in real time. So,
and I'm not familiar with Centric. Are they Irish?
So Centric Health actually are the largest GP network in the country. So they probably have they'd have a significant amount of citizens as patients. And why it's important, we also work very closely with Care Plus Pharmacies, who's a network. Where we're moving to is what we call Health 4.0, is network-centric healthcare. And
you do talk in acronyms, you know that?
Yeah.
I'm smiling to myself. Normally, we charge €20 for the poor box for everybody who's, in your case, we're going to make an exception because this is the language of the business, isn't it?
It is, and well, it's not yet adopted, but where I've learned, I had a colleague who wrote a really good book called Network-Centric Warfare, and the goal of network-centric warfare is what we call information superiority. And unfortunately, the way the health business in Ireland and perhaps internationally actually has operated, it's been around information suppression. 90% of European hospitals actually don't share the patient data or record with the patient.
Why?
Well, it's always been that the doctor knows best. Now, there are...
But I mean, this is 2022 or whatever it is. Like, surely we've moved way beyond that.
We haven't, actually. So the healthcare industry is about a decade behind other industries in digitalizing. So, we all know how to do Amazon or, our online banking. But we should have the same experience, consumerization. So we're about to do that. So again, on my phone, I actually have a patient held record. It's actually called Patients Know Best. It's from the world's leading supplier of personal electronic health records. And in fact, this implements the law because GDPR says actually the patient owns the data. And, as I said, 90% of hospitals across Europe don't provide the data. But we're now in a position where we can do something incredibly disruptive. We actually could provide a personal electronic health record in Ireland for the price of a cup of coffee per person per year. And that's remarkable. And that's Moore's Law at work. Every year we can do more with less. Now, this isn't yet HSE policy, but it actually is the guideline. We have 70 leaders that have come together. I think there's increasing recognition that it's not just the problem is so hard, and it's not just the responsibility of the public sector to transform healthcare. And that clearly hasn't worked. We've had Sláinte Care, and everybody agrees about it, but I'm always reminded by Winston Churchill. He said, no matter how beautiful the strategy, you occasionally need to look at the results. And literally the results aren't there. And what we find actually, the success rate of strategies that are written is probably 20%. But with an ecosystem of leaders, and we've built this professional network, and it's leading patients, it's leading doctors, it's leading CEOs, leading academics. We've developed this strategy, Stay Left, Shift Left. It actually has been approved by the HSE board last April, although there are some people that would dispute that. But we waited to communicate it until we actually had 50 proof points. So we now have 50 proof points of how this technology is working. And let me give you another example where we're now moving actually into implementation. And Open Innovation 2.0, for any of your listeners, is a book I wrote with a colleague from the European Commission. It actually has some nuggets. It's good for insomnia as well. But in this, we've collected a set of practices. So why were Apple successful? Why were Google successful? And why did Nokia actually fall off the cliff? And why did Motorola fail? And we're applying those principles. One of the practices is around industrializing innovation and also around agile innovation and designing for innovation. So we now have a methodology called Living Labs, which is a way to incrementally bring in change in a way that's non-threatening, but then allow rapid diffusion of radical innovation. So if I could give you an example, I was judging the HSE Excellence Awards yesterday, and in the first week of COVID, Eamon Costello, who's the CEO of Patient Empower, he approached me. Actually, in the very first day COVID showed up, and he rang me and said, look, we have a technology, we're monitoring lung transplant patients in New York using this technology. I think with some reconfiguration, we could reuse it for monitoring COVID. And he had a data point that, coming from Wuhan, that 40,000 patients and SpO2 or oxygen saturation level was a key indicator for, somebody having a COVID issue. By the following day, I was demonstrating it at the IIEA. We actually had a working prototype, and by Friday, it was, being prescribed in the Mater and St. James's. And within 5 weeks, it was deployed across the country. And subsequently, we had 500 GP practices using it. But in the past, that might have taken 5 years in the HSE, but we were able to do it in 5 weeks. But coming around full circle, yesterday I had 2 clinicians from Our Lady of Lourdes that had actually taken this technology and adopted it. And it's just 2 people, a physio and a clinical nurse manager. The results were extraordinary. What they saw by using this technology, something like 18% of the patients that showed up with COVID, they weren't required to be admitted. They were sent home and were remotely monitored. And then for the remaining cohort, most of them actually had an average length of stay, which was half the national average. So the number that they quoted was absolutely, astronomical. I need to go back and, validate, but in the last year and a half, they claimed they've saved 170,000 bed nights through using this technology, which is absolutely, even if it's only half the number or a third of the number, it's massive. Extraordinary.
Yeah, and if you monetize that, it's crazy.
Oh, it's absolutely. And this gives you the returns, you get, returns that are 1,000%, 100%, like the cost, vital signs automation to, if you can get new acute capacity by just using the capacity more efficiently, like the cost of deploying a new bed, if you physically build it, is about €1 million per bed, and the operating costs are about 300,000 per year. But if you can squeeze out incremental capacity, say 1%, 2%, 3%, there are no, extra costs. And this is what we must do. We must, work smarter, not work harder. And we absolutely do need to build new hospitals. But, some brilliant data. We're working very closely with a company called Always With You. And it is very difficult in Comfort Keepers. And we have a hospital at home lab, our hospital at home living lab, where we have 20 patients that are being monitored from home who otherwise would be in hospital. And we're doing that maybe at 1/40th of the cost of an overnight stay. And, McKinsey are saying from the Health Institute, which is excellent, a great source of health data, by 2025, which is only 3 years away, 25% of stays that are in US healthcare facilities will actually be done in the home. And everybody wants to be at home. If you could avoid going to hospital and you'll get the same treatment, and the device that I'm wearing, the vital signs, data from where, this will allow, actually an algorithm to be tracking my core body temperature, my breathing stats, my respiration, or my blood pressure, or not yet blood pressure, but blood pressure is coming very soon. So the world is going to change. We're almost at a Berlin Wall moment.
Well, you hold your Berlin Wall there, because I have to take a very brief break now, and I'll be back in a second with Dr. Martin Curley.
Make one small switch. Switching from shaving foam to all-natural de facto shaving oil will give you the smoothest, softest shave ever. Switching from shaving oil to de facto helps stop 20 million non-recyclable shaving foam cans go to landfills every year. Switching from shaving oil to de facto will save your skin, your pocket, and your planet. defactoshave.com.
Everyday accounting can be a bit of a drama for SMEs. However, BigRedCloud.com takes the drama away with its simple and easy to use cloud-based accounting and payroll software designed for SME owners. Raise and send invoices, manage VAT reports and obligations, run management reports, link directly to Irish banks, automatically import purchase invoices, and so much more. All with 5-star customer support. BigRedCloud.com, 100% Irish owned and a proud member of Team GBS.
All that great business show advertisers are Team GBS approved. Back them.
That great business show.
And I'm here with Dr. Martin Curley, and we are talking about the Berlin Wall, and that the Berlin Wall is about to come down. But I have to ask you another question. I called you Dr. Martin Curley because you have a PhD, and I'm amused here. You are so deep into medical knowledge now. When did you start learning about medical knowledge? Your background, as I mentioned at the very beginning, you're ex-Intel, you were with MasterCard for a while. Not a lot to do with medicine.
Yeah, no, thankfully, actually, as sort of a teenager, I was a volunteer with the Order of Malta. So I actually got to learn actually what it's like for a nurse to work in an A&E on a Friday night in the Mead Hospital. And it's actually not medicine. It's mostly dealing with drunks. But as an Intel executive, I had the privilege of doing quite a bit in healthcare. And actually, another device application that I have with me actually came from two guys that worked as part of my organization at Intel, Barry Green and Seamus Small, and they spun out a company called Kinesis. One of the big problems we have in Ireland, we're spending about €1 billion per year on falls. And you know, the statistics are horrific. If I can remember the US stats, about 1 in 5 falls actually ultimately results in a death, and something like 86% of hip operations actually comes from a fall. But Seamus and Barry, they have an app called Balance, and I literally put the phone to my chest and I stand up, and in 30 seconds it'll actually give me a prediction on how likely I am to fall, and will also send that information to my geriatrician or my GP, and then it'll give me some exercises. So we talked about Health 4.0 and patient empowerment and patient involvement, and in the past, you know, the doctor knows best, but the patient really knows best. So we actually have an integrated living lab that we're about to start, you know, with Balance and Kinesis, but we also have a fabulous product from a company called Tunstall and Pan. I'm wearing a device on my watch, as a wristwatch, and this will detect in real time if I fall, and an SOS call will be immediately generated, and I will get a call through my wristwatch within 20 seconds from a support person in Bunclody. They'll say, "Hey, Martin, you've just fallen. Are you okay?" If they don't get a response, they'll actually do a few checks, and if they don't check out, then they'll dispatch a service. So now we can detect falls, you know, 10 times easier or 10 times earlier in the past. And the earlier detect a fall, it can save lives, and it can also significantly reduce the average length of stay. But how I've got the medical knowledge, I've had to immerse myself in that, but it's actually going out into the field. Kind of my night job as a professor of innovation in Maynooth, and what I know is that working with the users and the clinicians and the patients, that's how you get to know. So probably once a week, I'm out, you know, in a hospital, you know, in a health centre, and we're working with the doctors and nurses, and particularly with the patients, to actually understand what are the issues and how we can provide solutions. And it's remarkable, one of the estimates, and this is an estimate from a couple of years ago, that medical knowledge is doubling every 79 days. Which is absolutely, you know, phenomenal.
Wow.
And the breakthroughs are happening. And this actually relates to Curley's Law, because these breakthroughs are coming thick and fast. And, you know, I think within 3 or 4 years, we'll be generating 100 times more data per person than we generate today. So on my diaphragm here, you can probably see it. I'm wearing a device that's actually tracking my respiration rate. And actually, this is a world first. And company in Cork, PMD, this is the equivalent of winning the Longitude Prize. So Miles Murray is an entrepreneur, and he had a vision about 10 years ago. Nobody could measure respiration rate. And the first week in COVID, we actually deployed this technology with Professor Richard Costello, brilliant entrepreneur and consultant physician, and he took a risk in Beaumont, and very quickly we found that the solution not only works, but it gave us 12 hours advance notice of a patient desaturating. So this is hugely important. This can be life-saving. I was, met with one of the ICU consultants from Beaumont, and we were looking at the data, and about 30% of the patients that went to ICU didn't come out alive. So if you can intervene early and avoid an intubation, then you can actually save lives. So when we put this into Beaumont, we also measured it against nurse-read respiration rates. And, for 100 years, or since Florence Nightingale was around, people have guesstimated respiration rates. And there's always
How is it done? By looking at somebody breathe?
Actually, by counting the breaths. And, there's a dirty little secret. Some hospitals had a number. It's 16 or it's 14 or it's 18. But we found that 80% of the nurse-read respiration rates were incorrect when compared to this gold standard. That's not because they're bad nurses. It's inherently difficult to measure, but this now is an innovation that actually could change the face of medicine. So over the last 20 or 30 years, oxygen pulse oximeters became the norm, and that has been probably the leading indicator when a patient deteriorates. But what we're finding is that respiration rate is actually the first vital sign to start to deteriorate. So we've made a big breakthrough. We've deployed this with Professor Vera Keatings in Letterkenny. And we have people living, say, in Killybegs or Glencolmkill that have COPD, and they might be hospitalised 5 or 6 times a year. We call them frequent flyers. We can now look at their
COPD.
So is a chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder.
Okay.
And it's smokers get it a lot, or disease, not disorder, disease. And people have, difficulty breathing, and they have to be hospitalised maybe 5 or 6 times a year, sometimes for as long as 10, 11, 12 days. Now we can see their respiration rates in real time, and Antoinette Doherty, who's the lead nurse there, she can actually see it, and she can call up the patient. She will have already given them a rescue script, so they might need to do more nebulization, they might need an antibiotic, or they might need steroids, but we can hopefully stop that patient being hospitalized. So this is 10x cheaper, maybe 50x cheaper. It's 10x better quality of life for the patient, and overall there's probably 4 or 5, and the clinician experience is much better because they can now see a longitudinal record of how a patient has been breathing, and we average out stuff like they went upstairs and their breathing rate increased, so you can set whether it's a 5-minute average or a 15-minute average, and this also creates tremendous opportunity for research. So we absolutely are the laggard in Europe. I can give you so many indicators, highest acute occupancy, lowest business and operational readiness for electronic health records, 20% more costly than the EU average, even though we have a significantly younger population. But these technologies can really be transformative, and we can leapfrog from the absolute laggard to the leader.
I've got so many questions, and one of them is, and don't laugh at me, have you got a photographic memory?
I have a reasonable.
You're talking to me, and you have no notes, and you're talking about people all over the country and what they're doing, and the companies behind them, and their outcomes and all. It's phenomenal.
Oh, well, thank you. It's all about relationships, and the unit of competition has shifted from the organisation to the ecosystem. So what I'm sharing with you is not HSE policy or strategy, or some of it is, but it's part of actually a broader initiative. We have the privilege of working with Elizabeth Teisberg, who wrote the book with Michael Porter of Harvard Business School, Redefining Healthcare. And they talk about, the way of transforming healthcare is through value-based competition. Now, we've gone beyond that, and we talk about value-based co-opetition. So we recently stood up a living lab in 2 weeks, and we produced something, very significant. I'll tell you about that in a second. But we had AWS and, Google Cloud or G Cloud that work, compete fiercely together, but they're actually collaborating on this. And one of the big issues with the healthcare industry is too many people get paid more to actually do the wrong things. And
explain.
So people get, paid. For example, my mother was very sick, and sadly she passed away last year, and that's another story. And one of the reasons why I'm so passionate is because what happened to my mother, I don't want it to happen to anybody else, but she was in one of the private clinics I won't mention, and they were just running test after test, and there was no indication. She was already quite old, but they were just printing money, and I had to really challenge the consultant, say, why the hell are you doing this? And he immediately stopped. So, and we have diagnostic tests run, and so where we want to go, what the US tried to do was create what we call accountable care organizations, and we've taken that concept and tried to apply it to healthcare in Ireland, and we call it accountable care ecosystem. So everybody is working actually not to maximize their own profit, but to actually deliver the best outcomes. So we're moving from outputs to outcomes, and we're moving from transactions to relationships. And we've been able to build this high trust relationship where we would have people like Eileen Byrne, who's the CEO of Clanwilliam, and working with Donal Bailey, who's the Innovation Director of Centric Health. And we work with John Carroll, the CEO of Care Plus Pharmacies, and John Sheehan, who's a radiologist, or the Radiology Director in Hermitage. We're working with patient advocates, and we're actually partnering. So how do we architect this system for the future? And the problem with the Irish healthcare system and many healthcare systems, they've never been architected or engineered. And as an engineer, I'm an electronic engineer, I know the important systems aren't sustainable unless they have been engineered correctly, and we are just pouring money into a black hole. But there is a competency issue. Some of the decision makers, not through their own fault, they're educated as an economist or they're educated as whatever, they actually don't have the awareness, actually the power of digital. So we've had to, this seeing is believing. We've had to wait for a year to actually prove these, proof points. But even still, there are some resistance, and we actually, when we go out to the doctors and nurses and the patients, such a pull. We're on the, we're creating a movement, viral change, but probably the most resistance we're getting to, this, and it is a movement. And the Harvard Business School wrote an excellent paper, about 2 months ago. I think we're a great model. One of the ex-editors, it's called a grand coalition. So to solve these gnarly problems, you actually need to get everybody working together to solve them. And healthcare is probably, the biggest problem of all. So what we're achieving in Ireland is, the whole ecosystem working together. And our goal would be in 3-4 years that actually Irish citizens are the healthiest ones on the planet. If I can give you one example, because I was talking to the Tallaght there a few weeks ago at a launch, a Health Beacon, one of the spectacular. I know this is a business show, and just a shout out to Jim Joyce and Kieran at Health Beacon. They've done a marvelous job. First digital health company to go public in Ireland, and they're achieving remarkable results on medication adherence. But what I was saying to the Taoiseach was, you won't improve the health of Irish citizens by putting more money into the healthcare system. The big opportunities are around nutrition and exercise and wellness. So what we're proposing, and we've put together this architectural innovation, and there's a framework Bain and Henderson have put together, the different types of innovation, disruptive innovation, modular innovation, incremental innovation. But probably the most powerful type of innovation is something called architectural innovation. So we have run a living lab with 20 citizens, and we're about to move that to 500 citizens. And we started with Care Plus in Dunboyne, and we've been working very closely with John Carroll, the CEO, and his team. So what we're proposing, every Irish citizen would get a rapid health assessment. You can go to your pharmacy and you'll get a 10-minute health assessment. We'll take bloods. We'll see if you have atrial fibrillation. We'll take your vital signs. You'll then be provisioned with a personal electronic health record that's secure, a lot more secure than having your data in a HSE data centre. Within 24 hours, you will get a plain English report that is, signed off by a doctor, but also we'll be using algorithms and AI to look for problems. And then you'll be given a recommendation of what you need to do. But we'll also enroll you, if you so wish, in a program which you'll be given a fitness device. It could be a Fitbit, a Huawei, an Apple, and you'd also be given a digital therapeutic. So we can do all of this for less than the cost of a PCR test. So this is 100 times more productive than a PCR
10x,
test.
remember 10x?
10x. Yeah, indeed, 10x, maybe 100x. So can you imagine, like today, 60% of Irish adults are overweight and obese. 54% are not meeting the standard levels of exercise. And I have to admit, when I have a really busy day, I don't meet my 10,000 steps. But this is the single most important, according to the McKinsey Health Institute. 67% of the opportunity in terms of health improvement is around this nutrition, the wellness, the lifestyle, and let's not forget mental health as well. So we could provide a check every 2 years to every Irish person that makes them well, and we give them a digital therapeutic that actually encourages and empowers them. And, the earlier you catch a chronic disease, 70% of deaths are from preventable chronic diseases. So if you catch these earlier, you can actually reverse them. Much better quality of life, but you save 10x or 100x the lifetime cost. So if a diabetic, for example, if you're talking about diabetic foot amputations or, retinal issues, that's really challenging. I just want to give a shout out to a Galway-based company. We work with Bluedrop, and they've developed a smart scales, and their product looks like an Apple product. But somebody that's a diabetic, they just step onto the scales when they get out of the bed, and it does a thermal and a visual image of the foot. There's an AI algorithm, and it can detect very early if there's an ulcer developing. So that can be, intervened. But, the numbers across the world, the number of people that have lost toes from diabetic foot ulcers, but if you can take them really early, reverse them. So there's a massive opportunity. Not only can we make people healthier and we can avoid something as traumatic as a foot amputation, but we can dramatically reduce the cost. And we actually can do it. We have the proof points, and all it takes is courage, competence, and conviction.
I've been very quiet for a very good reason. I'm quite simply stunned at what you're telling me about all these, what's coming down the tracks. Is it too good to be true? There must be naysayers out there who are saying, come on, Martin, it's not that easy, or it's not that straightforward.
No, these results are real, but let me tell you, Schopenhauer or Thomas Kuhn wrote about the structure of scientific revolutions, and I've been applying some thinking from a German philosopher, Schopenhauer, and he talks about kind of 3 stages for the adoption of truth, and I've applied it to the adoption of a radical innovation. First, you're ridiculed. People say it's absolutely crazy. Then you're fiercely resisted, and, frankly, and as again, I'm chair of the Irish Digital Health Leadership Steering Group here. I'm representing Maynooth University. I'm representing the Academy of Engineering. I'm representing the Royal Irish Academy, but I'm not specifically articulating the HSE policy. We actually have a strategy approved by the board that are people that discuss that. So we're now in the space of fierce resistance. We have huge, when we go out to the clinical directors, the consultants, the nurses, they're welcoming with open arms, and we're co-designing the solutions. Actually, the best source, we work very closely with Colin Doherty, who's really eminent consultant in St. James's, and he works with epilepsy patients, and he's been the lead co-designer. And we have created in 6 weeks a new electronic patient record system for epilepsy patients. He's been the lead designer, and he says the data is actually 100x better than the data he was working with. So this is a law that, keeps on giving. But there is resistance. Machiavelli talked about there's nothing more dangerous nor perilous to undertake than to try and bring around a new order of things. So, the biggest resistance, and I've no problem saying this, is we have a lot of senior executives in the HSE that believe this, but there are some that are still in the old linear view of the world and keep doing what they're doing. They're totally over-reliant on consulting companies. So we just have to do it. So it's about courage, competence, and conviction. And the decision makers need to be competent enough. And, I had a really interesting interaction with Pascal Donoghue there in Bagot Street in a coffee shop. I said, hello, I'm Martin Curley. You don't know who I am, but you will. And I described, what I was doing, and he said, oh, you're one of 50 others, and I said, well, look, I'll come back to you with the results. So seeing is believing. We've waited until these results are here, and we have 50 examples. Like we had this group from Purdue in this morning, and they're literally blown away by what we're doing in Ireland. And, they're asking, can we help them actually fix the US healthcare system now? And we are working together. I was privileged to chair a session at the United Nations General Assembly last year on digital health. We're going to repeat it. And we've put out a position paper signed by about 14 or 15 luminaries around the world, which is Stay Left, Shift Left as the new paradigm for global healthcare transformation. So I need to explain to you what Stay Left, Shift Left is, because...
You do, but I have to take a quick break. So if people will stay with us just for a minute or two, take a break, and then we'll go Stay left, shift left, 10x.
Everyday accounting can be a bit of a drama for SMEs. However, BigRedCloud.com takes the drama away with its simple and easy to use cloud-based accounting and payroll software designed for SME owners. Raise and send invoices, manage VAT reports and obligations, run management reports, link directly to Irish banks, automatically import purchase invoices, and so much more. All with 5-star customer support. BigRedCloud.com, 100% Irish owned and a proud member of Team GBS.
Thinking of travel? If so, make sure to make De Facto, the world's best shaving oil, your choice of travel companion. A 25 millilitre bottle of De Facto means no hassle at airports, no bulky cans to carry, and the guarantee of the world's best shave. DeFactoShave.com.
All that great business show advertisers are Team GBS approved. Back them.
Okay, Martin Curley, Dr. Martin Curley, Professor Martin Curley, Stay Left, Shift Left, 10x. Explain.
So Stay Left, Shift Left actually is a description of Sláinte care in 4 words. So Stay Left means using technology to keep people well in their homes, or if you happen to have a chronic condition or need rehab, you can be managed best of all from home.
And what does the Stay Left mean?
Well, that's the whole other interesting story.
I like words.
Well, let me come back to that then. And there's quite a funny story, the origin of Stay Left. But Shift Left was a term that Andy Grove, who was Time Man of the Year, Intel founder, and Doug Bush, who was my boss at Intel when I was based in Sacramento. And Stay Left was about using technology to move patients as quickly as possible from an acute to community to a home setting. And what they observed is, if you shifted left, it was much cheaper to be treated in, say, a community hospital than an acute hospital. And if you could do it from home, it was even cheaper still. So I kind of built on that, and everything, you build on other people's works. I joined the HSE as the CIO, and interesting, after the 3rd day, I thought I died and gone to hell, but that's a other discussion. But my first kind of major conference as CIO, I was a keynote speaker at, I think it was, Mobile Health. And I was driving in the tunnel, and I was trying to figure out, how do I extend this metaphor to actually well-being and wellness? As I came out of the tunnel, I saw this sign, Stay Left. So immediately it was Stay Left, Shift Left. So, when I initially, checked this with the Department of Health, they were kind of a little bit concerned, gosh, of their political connotation. It could as easily be Stay Left or Stay Right. If I get to meet, sadly, Andy Grove is dead, but when I meet Doug again, I'll ask him, why did he pick left rather than right? But it's a very simple metaphor. And what we found, for example, Richard Jones, he's the CEO of a top serial entrepreneur, and he recently recorded a piece for us, and he talked about Stay Left, Stay Left, Shift Left, kind of traveling the world as a meme, something like see it, say it, sort it, or something like that. It's such a simple concept, and once you explain it once, people immediately get it. And what we're trying to do is actually have the Irish ecosystem work as a dynamic capability. David Teese is a professor in Berkeley, and dynamic capabilities is an idea that you can rapidly reconfigure resources to meet needs. And what the Irish Health Service and many other health services exhibited during COVID was they could reconfigure really quickly. But now we're back to the old way of doing things. But if we could just apply the same dynamicism to moving towards wellness, so many lives will be saved. So this is really urgent. I know every day that we don't do this in Ireland, people are going to die. People are having, suffering that they don't need. and the costs are astronomical. So we use stay left, shift left, every solution that we look at. So how is it going to help us stay left, shift left? And what we're finding, because of the exponential nature of digital technology, because healthcare is so information intensive, and if you use an innovation methodology, a lot of people talk about innovation. It's much harder to do, but it is emerging, into the science. And the book that I wrote with Bor Samuel tries to codify the structural change in an industry. How do you do it using digital technology? And there are what we call design patterns. You have to orchestrate the industry. You have to have a shared vision. You have to industrialize the innovation process. And that's what we've done at the HSE. So we actually have an innovation process that's as good as Intel has or Google, and we have stage gates. We have very clear criteria. And that's why we're moving very fast. So we absolutely are the laggard in Europe, but our improvement trajectory is way faster than most other countries. So our intercept is 2025, and to be the European digital health leader, or at least a European health leader. And one of the lessons I learned in life is the better the players you play with, the better you get. So we are working with the leaders, with the Norwegians, the Finns, the Danes. We actually work with the UK. There are some areas where the UK are really in a leadership position. We recently ran a great event with the UK healthcare industry. They published a set of what they call the first 100, the top 100 UK healthcare countries. We worked very closely with British Embassy here, and Peter Harnett and Shirley McKay.
We've had Shirley on.
Yeah, no, very nice person. We had a nice dinner the other week there with the ambassador, Paul Johnson, who's very articulate and really understand what we're doing. But we picked the top 10 UK companies, and we asked them to present to us, how are you going to help Ireland stay left, shift left? We had about 16 assessors using 12 criteria, and we got very clear signal that 3 of the companies were, in a leadership position. So one of them was patients know best. So that is what we're using for a personal electronic health record. And before anybody shouts procurement, foul, before we can deploy any of these technologies, broadly adopt them, we have to go to a procurement competition. So we've worked very closely with HSE procurement and with Philip Lee. And Philip Lee personally is a brilliant man.
Is Philip Lee the solicitor?
Solicitors, yep. Yeah. And it's funny, I walked into Philip's offices, and they actually had my definition of innovation up on I published a book with Esther Baldwin, which we're republishing, called, it's now going to be called Managing Innovation in Digital World, but we have a definition for innovation that we think is quite good. It's been adopted by the European Commission. It's the creation and adoption of something new that creates value for the organization that adopts it. But we've worked, procurement law is tricky, and it's been a real excuse in the past to not do innovation, but we've been able to work and be fully compliant where we can co-innovate together, where we co-invest. We can actually build prototype platforms and MVPs to actually prove out concepts. And that's what we need to do so we can move much quicker. And then when we've proven that, we can then define a functional specification and go to the market for procurement. So it's actually fair for everybody.
So you mentioned one Irish company there, but there are others that you think, did they come out of your roundtable discussion?
Yeah, we have. We're about to, so we're, and innovation is a lot about adoption. So we're actually taking the concept that the UK did, and we're going to publish our first 25. So the top 25 digital health companies that we've been working with. And in the past,
how many of those are Irish?
Well, it'll be 25 Irish companies.
Oh, even better. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Now we do work. We're working with 7 or 8 UK companies and so on. But, just from the top patient Empower, we're doing fabulous work with them. We have a respiratory ward with currently 950 patients that are remotely monitored, and fabulous case study with CF patients in Galway with Mike O'Malley. So having CF patients, cystic fibrosis is a problem because, hospital is a big source of infection. If you have CF, that's a real problem. So now maybe 1 in 4, 1 in 5 visits to actually go into the hospital, and everything else is done remotely. They're saving, Mike and his team have done a great study, about €900 per person in terms of euros and in terms of travel time, but the patient time that we're saving is remarkable. So Patient Empower is one company. PMD, that's the device that I'm wearing. They will probably, I think they'll be very successful, because what they've done is the equivalent of solving the Longitude Prize for navigation. This was the great unsolved problem in healthcare, respiration rate. We work with My Patient Space. Una is the NX EMC executive, and we have 5 or 6 disease types. So working with Donald Sexton in James's, we have 950 renal patients using that technology, and that technology could now, and the satisfaction rate from users is about 96%, which is really high, and it makes communications between the clinicians and the nurses and doctors and the patients much easier, and it's better outcomes, much more efficient, etc. So that's a real good candidate. We will go to market for a nationwide HSE app, but that certainly would be a strong competitor. And, there's T-Pro, a company that are, doing extraordinary things. They're going to grow. Jonathan Larby, they're now selling dictation software to every hospital group. Tunstall, in one of the unsung heroes of the Irish healthcare system, is a guy called James Doyle. And I had the privilege of being with his team in Bunclody maybe 2 months ago. And listen to this, they're monitoring 50,000 older people in Ireland already. They're kind of, an unknown business. And
what is that business?
It's called Tunstall Emergency Response. So they instrument people's homes, and they also do remote vital signs monitoring, and that's going to be, they have really serious export potential, because they've teamed up with a company called PanPan, and Gukshan Wang is a Trinity PhD graduate, and he's developed the PanPan watch, and he's worked on perfecting it, because many older people would use a pendant, but that's a little bit tricky to use. You have to remember, but you will wear a watch, something like a Fitbit, and if you fall, it's immediately detected. But it's also monitoring your steps. It's also monitoring your pulse rate. So can detect. Another company, you may know David Walsh, who, was the founder and brilliant entrepreneur between NetWatch. So he's teamed up with some colleagues, and now they have a solution, Halo Care in Carlow. I was recently with them, and we're about to go into a living lab for long COVID. So long COVID is a problem that it's actually quite significant, and we're going to start with Sean Kennelly in Tallaght and the team at Owen Bergen in Tullamore, and we're going to take a cohort of long COVID patients and remotely monitor them, and we think we can do that at 1/20th, 1/30th of the cost.
I'd love to hear the ads for that one. You in the blue hoodie, you've got long COVID or something like that. We are going to run out of time, so I've got just 2 questions. Paint me the picture of 2025 per Martin Curley. What, in terms of shortened queues, better outcomes, less and more of what?
So healthier citizens is the first thing. We're going to leapfrog. And people don't believe this, but Ray Kurzweil, the law of accelerating returns, he predicts we're going to see 100 years of change in the next 10 years. So this has happened. We actually know how to do this. We just have to decide to do it. And the number one thing we need to do, and this comes from an excellent OECD report, it's a political decision. We have to digitally transform.
But I can never understand, why would a politician not want to have it writ large that they, the way that they'll claim it, they transformed the Irish medical service, which we all agree is a shambles.
Yeah, well, that needs a better man than me to answer that. But I think actually I have to give great credit to Eamon Ryan, who's really come on board as a cross-government supporter, and he has been socialising the idea that this is something, and we've talked about this could be one of the top 3 things. It should be from the Taoiseach down, and I have spoken to the Taoiseach support, and there's indication from the Taoiseach that he is supportive. So what we've proposed is actually a strategy that's not just a healthcare strategy, it's an enterprise strategy, a sustainability strategy, and actually a tourism strategy. We actually even have Bord Fáilte involved. So I was talking to the Purdue.
I have to understand this, because you see, you've gone down a little rabbit hole on me. Tourism. Explain, please, very briefly.
So actually, we use if you can get a pill camera procedure done in Ireland, 1/5 of the cost it costs in Germany, and it's way more convenient. Nobody likes a camera being stuck up there, this is much more convenient. So if we can guarantee the best care in Ireland, like people go to Hungary for their dental, but the best cardiac care, if we're able to deploy the solution we've worked with Centric Health and Roche to do, we will have the best heart failure survival rates in the year. So there's an opportunity to grow. But we've also, we held a major event in Tullamore, and it was actually exhilarating. It was the whole ecosystem working together. But I had a live echo test or an ultrasound performed on me on my kidneys on the big screen. And that was using a device called a Butterfly IQ, which is a 20th of the cost of the device that's used in a hospital today. And the quality is as good as, if not better. Echo tests, for example, that's the rate limiter in heart failure. Now we have a tool from a company called Caption AI, where actually a care assistant can do, using AI, can produce the same result as a trained cardiologist. And I have to give credit to oncologist in the Beacon Clinic. I'm trying to think of Jenny's surname, lovely woman. But she did an AI test on actually Dave Byrne, who's one of the cardiologists, live on air at one of our Digital Academy forums. And it was perfect. 2 to 3 minutes, and we got the results. So where we'll be much healthier people, queues will be down, but only if we get the country to commit behind us. We know how to do it. We just have to decide. So this needs, and you're going to ask me who would I hire in a minute, and I'll give you the answer in a second. But it needs everybody to get behind this. It's going to create jobs. We can double the exports of digital health. Ireland can be the digital health leader globally. We're hoping to go out to Australia and New Zealand later in the year in a trade mission with Stay Left, Shift Left and 16 Irish companies saying, here's the Irish solutions that will help Australia and New Zealand have healthier citizens, cheaper, etc.
You may not be aware, but the Australians are coming here in the next couple of weeks on a trade delegation, and they're going to join us on that great business show. So,
brilliant.
So you can join us for that if you so wish.
I'd be delighted to, yeah.
Okay, the final question. First of all, Tom Murphy was so right. I love the idea of it, that we can actually do this. It's just so exciting. And I presume you're excited.
Oh, hugely. Now I am. Occasionally I go home in the evening, I have to take a really large arrow out of my back, and that hurts. But most of the time it's really encouraging. And the caliber of people, the John Sheehan's, the Dolan Baileys, the Anne Shorts, Anne Sheehan, the GM of Microsoft, is a huge supporter. John Carroll or so, Caroline Whelan, CEO of BlackRock Health Medical Group, Anthony Staines from DCU. There's so many really good people that are working with us, and they have profit motive, but they're also about people and purpose. So we can do it. We just we're at that Berlin Wall moment, and if I'm not killed, we're going to get there.
Fantastic. Great story. Final question. Who would you hire in a heartbeat? Martin Curley.
So 2 people I would hire. I'm not an Arsenal fan, but I'd hire Arsene Wenger. First, he actually played as a player, so he knows there's a lot of people that actually have never worked in a hospital that have got important positions. I think you need to have been, in a hospital environment, or really immerse yourself in that environment. And Arsene Wenger, he was consistently brilliant. I know 16, 18 years, Arsenal were always in the Champions League and, the undefeatable. So he's got passion, he's intellect, and he seems very human. Now, the second person is an unusual choice because to actually make this happen, and somebody I don't know too well, but has a very strong reputation, the person that needs to step up in Ireland to make this happen is Robert Watt. So I would hire Robert Watt. Robert has, a reputation as a decision maker. We're starting to get to know each other, and he may be surprised, but I think if Robert gets behind this, it will happen.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us on That Great Business Show. And that is it from That Great Business Show, episode 90. Do please share this podcast. You've heard it. You have to share it with anybody in medicine, anybody who wants to get into medical care, anybody who's got a medical issue. That's everybody. You should really share this podcast with them on social and tell them that Martin Curley sent you. A click of a button for you, commercial success for us. That is if you click and share and subscribe. Very important for you to subscribe to the podcast. Great brands like Big Red Cloud, Microfinance Ireland, ISME, Virgin Media, Udros de Goethe to advertise with us, and your business should do likewise. And if your business could use a straight €10,000 in cash, then listen back to episode 89, where we have details of a €50,000 cash giveaway to 5 businesses from the Visa card people. And I checked in with the Fox's Bow Whiskey people again. They've now reached 385,000 of their €500,000 fundraise. Listen back to Alice Carroll of Fox's Bow on episode 70 of That Great Business Show. And if you want to invest, they're on Crowdcube. And do take professional advice before doing so. And all our great business insights, particularly today, thanks to Tom Murphy, are brought to you, as always, thanks to our sponsor, De Facto Shaving Oil, the world's best all-natural shaving oil. And we work with our great friends here at the Dublin Podcast Studios, including sound engineer Mark 10X McCarthy, who makes us sound 10 times better. Later, studio manager Peter Rice adds those zips and zings that make our podcast one of the world's best sounding podcasts. The Dublin Podcast Studios are open for business. If you want to record a podcast, check the website and have a chat with Peter Rice. If you'd like the media group to produce your podcast, well then I'm your vocal. Talk to me, please. LinkedIn is the place to get me. And as always, the great business insights you hear on That Great Business Show, as I mentioned, made possible only by De Facto, made in Mayo, sold worldwide. And don't forget to buy Business Plus magazine, where we now have our regular column all about the podcast. So for me, Conwell Moran, for Muile Beachas agus Slán Tamil.